Imagine launching over 100 precision drones into the airspace of a global superpower.
Right. It is a staggering image.
Alarms are sounding, air defenses are firing into the night sky, and localized fires are breaking out at a strategic oil refinery just outside the capital.
And yet, the local state television decides to lead their broadcast with something entirely different.
Exactly. They ran a segment about a woman getting arrested over a hookah shaped like an Easter cake.
Yes, that bizarre contrast is exactly what unfolded in Moscow this week.
Good morning. Today is Friday, the 21st of June, 2026. You are listening to a comprehensive intelligence briefing.
Good morning to you and to all our listeners.
The title of today's deep dive is No Peace in Sight, Drones Over Moscow, Missiles Over Kyiv. I am your host, sitting alongside our resident intelligence expert to break down the latest developments.
It is a privilege to review the data with you today.
Before we move to the global chessboard, a brief message regarding the technology powering today's broadcast. This deep dive is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application brought to you by ProWave AI.
Right. And for our listeners who are tracking these events closely, Stylo News is the consumer-facing iteration of Stylo Intel Ops.
To put that in context, Stylo Intel Ops is the robust software architecture currently utilized for enterprise-level operations.
We are talking across government agencies, military branches, and multinational businesses.
Which means you, the listener, have unique access to an analytical tool fundamentally designed to support global decision-makers.
A powerful resource to have at your fingertips.
Indeed. The mission of our briefing today is straightforward. We will impartially analyze the primary patterns of events in the Russia-Ukraine conflict over the past 2 weeks.
And we will examine the impacts at the local, national, and international levels.
Our goal is to provide absolute clarity, not to generate fear. We will look at the perspectives of key decision-makers, analyze sentiment across the information space, and outline the most likely courses of action to watch for in the near future.
And as always, a quick reminder regarding our operational parameters, we maintain strict neutrality.
Absolutely.
We are here to report on the facts and the various political viewpoints contained within our intelligence sources. We do not take sides, nor do we endorse any specific narratives. We present the landscape as it stands.
So let us begin with a tactical picture on the ground. The tactical environment is no longer defined by the decisive maneuver breakthroughs we saw in previous eras of warfare.
No, it has shifted dramatically.
What we are seeing is a war of deep strikes, mass drones, and the systematic strangulation of infrastructure. We need to look at the mechanics of this.
It is essentially an entirely new doctrine being written in real time.
It is like trying to stop a swarm of hornets by firing Rolex watches at them. I mean, the interceptor missiles cost millions, but the drones cost mere thousands.
Right. That economic asymmetry is the defining characteristic of the current battlefield.
The strategy here isn't just to destroy cities, is it? It is to bankrupt the opponent's air defense economy.
Precisely. Looking at the pattern of Russian operations, Moscow is sustaining a relentless campaign of mass missile and drone attacks.
The data indicates they are routinely launching over 100 drones in single-eyed operations, right?
Yes, against major Ukrainian urban centers. We are seeing strikes on Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Poltava.
Let's break down the mechanics of those strikes, particularly in Kharkiv, where the reports confirm the use of double-tap tactics.
Right, a highly controversial and devastating approach.
Okay, for the listener trying to understand the operational logic here, what is the specific mechanism of a double-tap strike? And what is it designed to achieve beyond immediate destruction?
Well, the double-tap tactic is a calculated method of exhaustion. It involves a primary strike on a target, followed by a delayed secondary strike on that exact same location.
So they deliberately wait.
Exactly. The delay is specifically timed to coincide with the arrival of emergency responders.
Wow.
Civil defense personnel, specialized medical teams, they're all arriving just as the second strike hits. Mechanically, it forces the defense infrastructure into an impossible position.
Because first responders must either abandon their operational protocols,
Right, delaying life-saving interventions for the initial victims.
or risk the complete decimation of their specialized teams.
Exactly. It degrades the structural capacity to respond to future attacks while applying immense coercive pressure on the civilian population.
But Ukraine is obviously not absorbing these blows without a counter-strategy. Kyiv is actively expanding its deep strike reach far into the Russian rear.
Yes, they are launching their largest drone waves since the war began.
Now wait, the obvious question here is about capability. How are relatively cheap, domestically produced Ukrainian drones successfully reaching the Central Design Bureau in Tula or oil refineries in the Moscow region?
It is a valid question.
Doesn't Russia possess one of the most layered, advanced air defense systems in the world?
They do, but those systems were designed for a different era of warfare.
How so?
They were built to track high-altitude supersonic bombers and ballistic missiles. What Ukraine is doing is exploiting the radar horizon
Right.
by programming these cheap drones to fly at extremely low altitudes, utilizing terrain masking, literally flying down riverbeds or between hills.
So they stay below the radar coverage.
Yes, they stay beneath advanced systems like the S-400 until it is too late to intercept them. Furthermore, they launch them in massive swarms.
So it's a volume issue is why.
Exactly. Even if an air defense battery detects them, the sheer volume of incoming targets simply overwhelms the system's processing capacity and its finite number of ready-to-fire missiles.
Which explains the successful strikes on naval bases in St. Petersburg and the severe damage to the Chandar Bridge.
Yes, the Chandar Bridge strike is particularly significant.
And the choice of that bridge is fascinating. It links occupied Kherson with annexed Crimea. I mean, you don't just blow up concrete to blow up concrete. You do it to blow up the opponent's timetable.
Precisely the point. Severing the Chandar Bridge forces Russian logistics to take a massive detour.
Supply convoys must now route through the heavily monitored M14 highway, right?
Correct. It adds 12 or more hours to their transit time and exposes them to long-range Ukrainian artillery and HIMARS strikes for a much longer duration.
It starves the frontline troops of immediate resupply.
It does. It is a textbook interdiction strategy.
So Ukraine is successfully bleeding Russia's logistics and its defense economy, but running a war of this scale requires massive, sustained funding.
Absolutely.
To keep this drone campaign alive, President Zelensky has to convince his international backers that this strategy is actually working, which explains the diplomatic maneuvers we are currently observing globally.
It does. Which brings us to the diplomatic chessboard. When reviewing the international headlines, there is an abundance of signaling and exploratory dialogue.
Yes, quite a bit of chatter.
Yet, the intelligence assessment is stark. There is no genuine movement toward a durable peace accord at this time.
So we are seeing the illusion of peace talks.
Exactly. It is functioning more as positioning rather than conflict termination.
Okay, let's unpack this. If Ukraine is succeeding with these deep strikes, why are they publicly talking about peace frameworks at all right now? Shouldn't they press the advantage?
Well, it is a complex balancing act.
Or is this purely diplomatic theater to ensure continued Western financial and military backing?
It is the latter. Negotiations during an act of conflict are rarely about peace. They are about leverage. Objectively speaking, Russia continues to negotiate strictly from a position of force.
What are their core demands right now?
Moscow's core demands require territorial concessions and strict Ukrainian neutrality. They are essentially demanding that Ukraine permanently weaken its defense posture before meaningful talks can even begin.
And from the Ukrainian perspective, President Zelensky is using these successful deep strikes as proof of concept to his allies.
Exactly. He is actively pushing for the international release of frozen Russian assets to fund these defense efforts.
Right. Kyiv's stance is that continued, robust Western backing is an absolute prerequisite before substantive negotiations can occur.
This positioning was highly visible at the recent G7 summit in France.
The international impact of this conflict remains profound, and the diplomatic trading is complex. At the summit, U.S. President Donald Trump offered renewed support for Ukraine, but it was highly conditional.
Yes, very conditional. The specifics of those conditions are a prime example of global geopolitical leverage.
I mean, the U.S. is essentially using the Eastern European flank to buy chips for the Middle Eastern poker table, right?
That is an accurate assessment. They tied continued support for Ukraine to European backing on completely separate security issues.
Specifically, securing a ceasefire agreement with Iran.
Yes, and committing European naval assets to clearing mines from the Strait of Hormuz.
Because roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz.
Correct. The United States recognizes that European nations are desperate to maintain the buffer that Ukraine provides against Russia.
Therefore, Washington is leveraging that desperation to force Europe into sharing the security burden in the Middle East.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the regional concerns for European nations bordering Russia are escalating dramatically.
We are seeing NATO facing a very real indirect escalation threat Traditional NATO doctrine is currently struggling against this new reality.
It certainly is.
For instance, Latvia's Prime Minister, Andris Kulbergs, used the NATO talks in Brussels to issue a stern warning regarding Russian aggression.
Yes, he took a very proactive stance.
He signed an agreement to bring Ukrainian military experts into the Baltic states, specifically to train their forces in counter-drone warfare.
Because the Baltic states recognize that traditional multi-billion-dollar NATO air defenses are proving inadequate against these new asymmetric drone threats.
A $2,000 drone can bypass a flagship defense network.
It is a sobering reality for them. Simultaneously, Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, is forcefully insisting that Poland must have a seat at any future negotiating table.
Which makes sense geographically. I mean, Western Europe might view Ukraine as a strategic buffer, but Poland views Ukraine as its front porch.
That is a very apt description. Tusk is expressing deep skepticism over Western European powers guiding peace talks without the direct input of the frontline eastern flank.
The physical battlefield and the diplomatic tables are highly complex. But to truly understand the trajectory of this conflict, we must analyze a third front, the information space.
Yes, the narrative control is just as heavily contested as the physical territory.
Reading through these different sources is honestly like looking at 3 different weather reports for the exact same hurricane. Each one emphasizes a completely different danger zone.
It is a fractured media landscape. Let us break down the sentiment data impartially.
Where do we start?
When analyzing pro-Ukrainian sources, such as the Kyiv Post, the narrative focuses heavily on resilience and military innovation.
Right. They highlight how Ukraine is sharing massive drone footage data sets with NATO, correct?
Yes, to train artificial intelligence targeting systems. They consistently emphasize Russian vulnerabilities, frequently pointing out the mechanical failures of Russian air defense systems against incoming strikes.
Then you have sources that reflect a more critical or mixed sentiment, like the Moscow Times.
Yes, the intelligence shows the Moscow Times portraying the Kremlin as escalating toward a state of total war.
They are focusing on the domestic impact.
Their coverage frequently highlights the severe economic strain within Russia, noting the inflation caused by unchecked military spending.
Furthermore, they report on the cultural damage caused by the strikes, such as the hit on the historic Kyiv Pokrovsk Lavra Monastery.
Exactly. Conversely, when we look at the pro-Russian sentiment from state-aligned outlets like RIA Novosti and Izvestia, the picture shifts entirely.
How are they framing the current situation?
Through those channels, the narrative highlights official Kremlin statements, consistently framing Russia's actions as purely defensive measures against unwarranted Western interference.
A prime example in the recent intelligence is their heavy amplification of the discovery of alleged NATO-supplied weapons caches.
Yes, in occupied territories like Krasnoarmysk. They utilize this to justify the narrative to their domestic audience that they are fighting a proxy war against the entirety of NATO, rather than a localized conflict.
What I find particularly fascinating in the intelligence estimates is how information is actively managed or completely omitted within Russia itself.
It is a sophisticated operation.
This brings us back to that bizarre scenario we mentioned at the top of the briefing. We had the largest drone attack on Moscow airspace, and state television was talking about a hookah.
Right. It is a textbook demonstration of a mechanism known as flooding the zone.
How does that work in practice?
Well, on the night of June 18th, Moscow experienced a massive security breach with drones causing localized damage and fires at a refinery. Yet, Russian state television largely ignored it.
Instead, they focused heavily on a local bus incident in the Bryansk region.
And they devoted significant primetime airtime to the controversial imprisonment of a woman named Ksenia Belousova.
She was jailed for a religious offense involving a hookah shaped like an Easter cake, right?
Yes. The strategy here is not necessarily to convince the public that the war isn't happening.
No, it's about distraction.
The strategy is to curate a domestic reality where trivial, hyper-local controversies drown out strategic failures.
By flooding the airwaves with domestic absurdities and minor regional incidents, the state apparatus effectively distracts the middle-class public from the reality of hostile drones penetrating their capital's airspace.
Exactly. It prevents panic and maintains domestic stability.
Which leads us to the final segment of our Intelligence Brief Strategic Horizons. We have analyzed the mechanics of the past 2 weeks. I want to ask you to synthesize this intelligence into actionable foresight for the listener.
Of course.
Based on the data, what are the most likely courses of action we should watch for in the coming weeks?
Based on the current trajectory and the economic realities we've discussed, the intelligence identifies 2 primary scenarios. Course of Action 1, which is assessed as the most likely, is a continuation of grinding attritional combat.
Paired with increased external European pressure for talks, I assume.
Yes. However, real substantive peace negotiations are highly unlikely before autumn. Any diplomatic movement will be entirely contingent on impending political milestones.
Such as the Russian State Duma election scheduled for this September.
Exactly. Neither side will concede leverage before their respective political calendars are secure.
So, more of the same grueling conflict through the summer, prioritizing the destruction of infrastructure over taking territory. What is the alternative scenario?
Course of Action 2 is a plausible alternative. We may see temporary localized ceasefires.
Arranged around critical infrastructure, perhaps.
Yes, or specific humanitarian corridors. However, it is vital to understand that these would not represent a comprehensive settlement.
They would just be tactical pauses.
Merely tactical pauses designed to allow for force regeneration and resupply, disguised under the veneer of diplomacy.
Stepping back from the immediate regional conflict, the intelligence highlights a massive global takeaway regarding military shifts. The war is serving as a live-fire laboratory for the rest of the world.
Yes, and this is perhaps the most profound long-term consequence of the conflict.
The technological advancements we are witnessing daily, specifically the mass utilization of cheap precision drones, are fundamentally leveling the playing field.
Between smaller nations and traditional great powers, the era of undisputed superpower deterrence is fracturing.
Because traditional command posts and million-dollar defense grids are no longer safe anywhere, even hundreds of miles behind the front lines.
Exactly. This shift in the mechanics of war is so significant that superpowers, including the United States, are actively accelerating their defense programs.
Like the development of next-generation doomsday command aircraft, right?
Yes, and entirely new strategic missile defense systems. They are preparing for a new reality where localized conflicts can instantly reach strategic depths.
A sobering assessment of the global security landscape. This concludes our formal intelligence briefing for today. For listeners who require this level of enterprise-grade analysis in their daily operations, you can utilize Stylo News.
It is an exceptional tool.
It is a mobile and computer application that individuals can download and fully customize. It generates personal intelligence-style briefs drawn from hundreds of traditional news sources and the X platform,
Giving you the complete picture.
Subscribe to Stylo News to get your AI-powered news on demand at www.stylonews.com. And with that, we are officially stepping out from behind the 1960s anchor desk.
Wow, it is remarkably liberating to drop the formal cadence and just speak normally again.
Right. I felt like I needed to adjust my tie and stare intently into a camera monitor every 2 minutes.
It was a very stiff posture to maintain.
But seriously, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope this format helped cut through the noise.
I think it did.
The goal is always to look past the surface-level headlines and explain the actual mechanics of what is happening on the ground and behind closed doors.
Absolutely. The world is incredibly complex, but when you break down the incentives and the economics behind these decisions, the patterns become much easier to see.
We would love to hear from you. Please reach out and request topics for future deep dives. Let us know what you thought of the anchor format. And don't forget to follow Stylo News on all your favorite social media platforms.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over based on what we've unpacked today.
Lay on us.
Well, we talked about how off-the-shelf, low-cost drones are now capable of bypassing billion-dollar defense systems and striking deep into superpower territory. If that trend continues, does the traditional concept of military supremacy even exist anymore? Or are we entering an entirely new geopolitical era where Goliath can always be bled by David?
Something to think about.
Keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.